Gentlemen, let's start with something an ex-girlfriend told me. They're all fun in their own way. No matter the size, you can have fun with it.
So where does the size of hockey rinks come from? Well, first we need to go back. Basically, stick and ball games have existed forever because the idea is so simple.
Rounding roll. I hit rounding with stick. I make game. I beat other team.
With the invention of metal ice skates, it's natural that you would play some type of ball and stick game on ice. And just like rules and equipment, the codification of play area has evolved over time. Early games of hockey, proto-hockey, precursors to hockey, were played on land or on natural ice. The size of the rink on ice was determined by factors like the size and the shape of the natural ice and how many players you had. In Europe, it's likely the idea of using a flooded football pitch in winter was not unique to the codification of bandy. So it's likely that proto games and pre-codification bandy used frozen, flooded football pitches. You can still see this today with bandy rinks being 100 to 110 meters by 60 to 65 meters. Pretty close to the size of a football pitch. You also later see the influence of bandy when the Soviet Union took up ice hockey using similar strategies as they did playing bandy. See, bandy remained popular in Nordic countries and Russia after Canadian rules hockey came to dominate most of Europe. Meanwhile, in North America, the Victoria Skate Rink was opened in Montreal in 1862. The ice was confined by Dunman Street and Stanley Street, making it 204 feet by 80 feet, about 62.17 by 24.38 meters. An indoor hockey game took place at Victoria Skating Rink on the 3rd of March, 1875. I remember when it was called the first hockey game, just outright. People were like, oh, it was the first hockey game. But that's kind of come into question, and now the current IIHF interestingly says, and I quote, "In 1875, the first pre-announced game between two named teams, officiated by a referee, with a recorded score, is played at Montreal Victoria Skating Rink on March 3rd. James Creighton's McGill team defeated Captain Torrance's Victoria team 2-1. Anyway, it was a major event as far as spreading hockey in Montreal and soon North America, and most historians will point to Victoria Rink's size influencing the size of hockey rinks in North America. And it was important, but standardization was far off. The LIHG, the original name of the International Ice Hockey Federation, was founded in 1908, and it did codify rules. However, rink size was not one of those at first. One of the most important things they did was they settled on Canadian rules hockey. This would have the effect of Canadian rules hockey having international tournaments in Europe, and being part of the Olympics, and also led to the decline of bandy, who did not form an international association until 1955. In 1920, the first game of hockey at the Olympics was played in Antwerp on 56 by 18 meter ice, so tiny. And also remember, back then there were 7 people on each team on the ice at a time. The fact that almost immediately after that 1920 Olympics, the LIHG decided to shrink teams to 6 players on the ice at a time implies to me that 7 players on that 56 by 18 meter ice had some issues and didn't quite work the way it was intended to. So I mentioned a little later that the LIGH adopting Canadian rules ice hockey caused bandy to shrink. And so with it not being the Olympics and bandy shrinking, many of the early European ice hockey teams were former bandy teams. These were bandy teams that were like, oh, This is going to be the sport for international competitions. It's close to ours. We're going to play Canadian rules ice hockey. In 1923, the rink size was codified by the LIGH to be 80 meters by 40 meters. And at the time, a game was 3 15-minute periods. Meanwhile, in North America, in 1929, the NHL sets a codified rink size of 200 feet by 85 feet. That would be 90.96 by 25.9. So we're going to call it 61 by 26 for simplicity. However, already built stadiums were grandfathered in, and many of these rinks continued to be used for decades. The Boston Garden, for example, was used by the Boston Bruins from 1928 until 1995, and it was undersized. It was 91 feet by 83 feet, so 58.2 by 25.3. In 1936, the LIGH changes the size of rinks to be 60 by 30 meters. This is what we are familiar with today. In 1946, the LIGH starts the process of rebranding and renaming itself the IIHF. All right, let's just go over some changes in game, changes in play, leading to hockey being what we recognize today. 1946, they changed to 3 periods of 20 minutes. Furthermore, in 1946, the IIHF adopted body checking, but only in your defensive zone. It was then extended to all 3 zones in 1969, and then in 1997, the IIHF took away the red line and allowed 2-line passes. All right, back to size, because I know that's what everybody's here for and what the boys are interested in. Over time, the IIHF has expanded accepted rink size from being 60 by 30 to being 60 by 26 to 30 meters, and seems to be heading towards making smaller the norm.
It's like that ex of mine used to say about, oh, I don't like the big ones. They hurt. I like smaller ones. They are a perfect fit for me. The 2 most common alternatives to the 60 by 30 being the 60 by 28, often called the Finnish style, and 60 by 26. You see this a bit in the KHL. It was also used at the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, and it's going to be used at the upcoming Milano Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics. 60 by 26 being the closest to the North American standard rink size. It's often nicknamed Canadian or metric NHL rink. I guess we need to take a little bit of time and talk about the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan. I know a lot of people in North America seem to have expected it to have been exactly 60.96 by 25.9 instead of 60 by 26. And a lot of people are making a big deal out of it for clicks. Despite it being regulation size and the same size as the 2022 rink in Beijing. I mean, hopefully by the time I release this, people's brains have turned back on and people are like, oh, okay. Oh yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna watch this guy's video about where the history of this came from. It has also brought an ongoing debate into more focus. The criticism that the approximately 61 by 26 sized rink used by the NHL is too small. This is not a new debate. This is not a new criticism. The argument is that this was a size for nearly 100 years ago when skaters were smaller and not as fast. And I do think that this criticism highlights what a lot of people know, and this goes against what a lot of girlfriends have told me, that smaller might not be better. For example, the coach of the U.S. Olympic hockey team and the coach of the New York Rangers, Mike Sullivan, has voiced that NHL ice is already too small and should be expanded. Now, me personally, I feel like 60 by 28 is a good size, like Goldilocks zone, not too big, not too small, and if everyone was going to standardize on one, that would be my vote. But I don't actually think it's necessary. I think a little bit of variation between rinks adds to the game. I also think that if we did come out with a new standard, it would take so long for it to actually be implemented everywhere. I think that, particularly I live in a country where there's not many rinks. The number of rinks is going down. Not a lot of new rinks are being built. So I think that any grandfathering clause, that grandfather clause would last for a long time. Maybe the best way to do it be like, oh, any new Olympics has to be on 60 by 28, and over time people would adopt to that one if that the entire world was going to go to one standard. But I also am one of those people, I don't mind, and I kind of like regional variations in my sports. There's also rink bandy, which is interesting because it's played on a hockey rink, so it's played on a 60 by 30 meter ice. It's kind of fun to watch. It's got a lot less players than regular bandy, so you get smaller teams. I'd love to go to like a real bandy game in like some Nordic country. I think that'd be really fun. But I'd have to get there and, money, travel, drag the wife and kid. Ugh. The wife doesn't travel very easily. The kid travels pretty easily. And the upcoming Milano Cortina, and a lot of people are making a big deal out of it for clicks. I mean, I kind of am doing that, but I'm hopefully most of it has died down and, people are using their common sense and brain by now.